Yo, what is up, guys? So we're here to showcase off the new Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon, the new Link monster that makes it so much easier for a lot of different archetypes to go ahead and spam the board. Today we're going to be showcasing off some Karakuris, and obviously getting a bunch of tokens that have the level of 3 lets you kind of spam the board. And we're also going to be technically be able to summon the Dao Gongen, which is the new boss Karakuri. It lets you actually banish a card that your opponent has when you actually change a battle position of a monster, which the Karakuri Toad will actually let you, as a quick effect, banish a monster during your opponent's turn, and that allows you to tactically go into the disruption. So Karakuris actually have a bunch of different cards to actually negate, but this is one of the more newer ones, and I'm going to go ahead and showcase off a few of the different ways that you guys can build and utilize some of the negations that Karakuris do offer. It is a deck that can definitely OTK quite hard. However, with the new Mecha Phantom Beast Link monster, it basically sets you up turn 1 to go ahead and go off in turn 2 to OTK your opponent, and then you have a few cards at your disposal for some disruption over here. Like, of course, the Dao Gongen, and on top of that, you have access to drawing cards, then also special summoning monsters. It's a deck that can definitely OTK, and it has some forms of disruption. I'll go ahead and get into that in a moment over here. But nonetheless, I still think Karakuris are still at a significant disadvantage due to the Link era. Just going into it, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to do things, and pretty much going into this lets you just have 2 Link monsters. It is a fantastic card for the archetype, but I still think that it lacks a lot of other consistency that other decks would technically have. I mean, there is a little bit of RNG with this card with the draw mechanic, but you can technically run a bunch of other forms of disruption. But this is the problem. It requires you to have a Karakuri monster, and while that obviously seems like it's pretty easy in a Karakuri deck, if you're going second, because of the disruptions are going to be slow because they are counter traps, also requiring you to have a Karakuri monster, it makes it a lot less able to be utilized, because maybe your monster's summon gets negated, the effect gets negated. You can't do anything with this card because it sits there and it cannot be used for the rest of the turn, because you cannot link summon for the rest of the turn. So basically, you're locked into basically synchros and exceeds, but pretty much Karakuris are all about synchros. But you guys can definitely see, you can definitely OTK very easy in this deck, but let's go and check out some gameplay where it doesn't go ahead and have the Mecha Phantom Beast turn 1, because I kind of want to showcase off Karakuris, because I haven't talked about them in quite some time. Even after they got their new support, no one was really inclined to run them, and that's just simply due to the way that they are at the moment. Like, they don't offer enough, I think, disruption with consistency. You basically would have to go first, and you would happen to need to go ahead and go for the Dao Gongen. And then on top of that, they're very susceptible to hand traps. If you disrupt, like, let's say, Bure, you basically are out some of your other cards. But there are technically things like Desynchro, Resynchro, and you can go ahead and make, like, Clean Genius over here, and just kind of open up the doors to more zones. But really what it comes down to is Machine Dope plus the Toad opens up more disruption potential. But again, you're stuck with, like, Dao Gun negate 1, right? Like I said, you can get it up to more, and I'll explain that in a moment once we go over the deck profile over here. But once again, being able to banish a card can completely stop a deck from functioning. But you also have the Cash Lodge, which makes it so you get to target a Karakuri monster and one effective monster your opponent controls. You get to change the battle position of your monster, and if you get to negate the effects of that opponent's monster until the end of this turn. And then if you control a Karakuri monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, target it face-up monster on the field, and change its battle position. So you're able to technically use this card twice, so it has some utility with that. But for the most part, I think that people will look at this and say the deck doesn't have enough negates. But you can get the negate count up pretty high, and I will explain that once we go over the deck profile. I mean, for hires, like, if you disrupt them once, that's pretty much it. Going to move this guy to defense mode, and then on top of that, now we're going to be able to draw a card. Now we're going to be able to banish. If they only had this card, like, if this card was a hand trap and it was searchable and it was just much more accessible, like, if you were able to special summon, like, a new Karakuri and it instantly added, like, the hand trap, it would just make the deck so much better. This being an actual trap card is just way too slow. But like I said, I did want to go ahead and go over some other things here and talk a little bit about their other cards that people don't really use, but they do happen to have some form of disruption that wasn't utilized to its full extent. But I gotta give a shout out to my boy Stardust YGO for setting in this deck profile as well as the gameplay. But he also wanted to technically shout out Lithium, because he got the deck idea from Lithium. But anyways, let's go ahead and go over the disruptions, and then I want to talk about the deck profile. So anyway, so Cash Shed is actually a decent card. You have to control a Karakuri monster in defense position, but you get to negate the activation of a spell or trap card and destroy it. And then you have the Cash Lodge over here, which is the card I already explained. It can negate a monster's effect, and then you get to banish it and then change the battle position of one monster on the field. But again, I just feel like it's too slow. They're also, because I typed in Cash and it came up with these two. There's actually a third card. It's not for Karakuris, but when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect by paying their life points, you get to negate the activation and return it to the deck. That was an interesting card also, but it has no utility in Karakuris. It just happens to have the word cash for I don't know what reason. But Karakuris do have a few decent cards. Like, for example, Anatomy over here. Once they change the position, it almost reminds me of like Six Sam United. You equip it to a Karakuri. Then each time the position is changed, you get to place a counter on it, and then you get to draw one card for each counter. So basically it becomes like a Pot of Greed. But you do have to utilize that effect. But the problem that, I have with this whole archetype is that you have to change the battle position. A lot of the times it's like a once per turn kind of a thing with a lot of the other cards. Like when the card gets summoned, you get to do this, or it's very like mostly once per turn is I think the problem. But this technically does help you out, but are you really going to equip this past turn and then later hopefully your monster stays alive and you can activate it? That's again some of the problems that you can have with Karakuris, but I still want to give the deck a chance over here. But anyways, so we have 3 copies of the Karakuri Monk 9763. Actually, we should just call them by their numbers because that's going to be a lot easier, especially if you guys are searching these up. Like looking up the numbers is going to be easier, so I'll call them by their numbers. So we have 1 copy of 236, 1 copy of 313, 1 copy of 248, 3 copies of 224, and then 3 copies of 177, which is one of the best ones. This one just lets you add any Karakuri card from your deck to your hand, which can be some of these cards, but it does require you to technically have it as your normal summon. And then we have 3 copies of 4624, which is the Toad. This is like the new card that opens up a lot of doors for the deck. And then we have Desynchro, so you can resynchro into your plays. And then on top of that, when the card gets summoned, you get some type of effect, but then it has like a once per turn you could change battle position. And then, of course, because we're trying to summon the Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon, for the Karakuris, it's just great to have, of course, your Engage. And then 3 copies of Machine Dupe with Toad, it just is so excellent. It's something with 500 less attack, and pretty much majority of the things are going to be targets for Machine Dupe. And then we have Upstart Goblin, 3 copies of Cash Shed. This one just lets you add 1 level 4 or lower Karakuri monster. And then we have Reborn, we have 1 copy of the Afterburner, 2 copies of the Succession, 1 copy of Hornet Drones, and then 3 copies of Pot of Greed in the deck, then 3 copies of Toad Oil. I didn't really get to go over this in the gameplay, so you target a Karakuri in your graveyard, special summon it, and equip it with this card. Once per turn, if the battle position of a Karakuri monster you control is changed, the equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense. There's also like this card I wanted to mention, Iron Call. It lets you, if you control a machine monster, you can target a level 4 or lower machine monster in the graveyard and special summon it. It does negate the effects where this doesn't. So sometimes though, most of the time, like the small ones, you won't be getting their effects anyways, because well, you're just going to use it as synchro fodder. But as far as the extra deck, we got the Sea Monster of Thesis. I'm guessing originally he had Instant Fusion here, because that was a very popular card in the Karakuris. But 2 copies of the Buribu over here. 3 oh, actually, you know what? This is the Galgan, yeah, the 00X. And then we have 3 copies of the Burrito, 3 copies of Bure, then the number 38, the Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. Technically, you can make this turn 1 if you happen to go off with your plays completely, and then you can utilize 2 copies of Burrito and go into this, and then you could still happen to have a Galgan. Then you're looking at 2 negates, and then this card can search out anything, so you can look at like the deck as a potentially 3 negate deck, but it's relatively inconsistent. I will definitely admit that to pull that off. But then we have Clay Genius, and then Acer Sieg, and then you have Kagari. The reason why it's inconsistent though really comes down to Bure is always made before this, so I think that's the problem. You could alternatively go for because this is a 7. I still really think the hot was it Red Dragon, the Exceed. Oh, you know what is it? What is it? It's the, is it red? Or is it Red Eyes? It's Red Eyes Flare Metal. This card, okay. So you can definitely make this card very easy in this deck. I still think that going for this turn 1 with your double Berets, if you decide to go for double Berets, and then after that you can go and make a Buribu over here. That would be excellent. That opens up the doors to potentially like one negate, and then this stops so many different other things. And I think that could be a way to run the deck. And then if you happen to have any of these, it could be great. Again, remember, this card searches out any Karakuri card, which could be great for that. But again, I still think the deck isn't nowhere near competitive as it could be. But that's my thoughts on the new Karakurs, as well as giving you guys some gameplay of it. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel here, hit subscribe, turn on the bell, see more new Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos. And I also want to mention real quick, I am doing a giveaway for a giant Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. If you guys haven't seen that, I'll pin that down below. It's going to be ending in 2 more days. But thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. I'm out. Peace.